Hello folks, welcome to my review of this, the Genesis GV60. These start at a shade under £54,000. This one is the base trim, although it's got a few options. And that base trim is called Premium. It's got a 77.4 kilowatt hour battery and it can charge from 10% to 80% in just under 20 minutes if you're on a very fast charger. This one delivers 225 brake horsepower and is capable of 0 to 62 in 7.8 seconds, and it's got a claimed WLTP range of 321 miles, although I dare say, depending on the temperature and the way the moons and the suns are pointing, it's probably going to be closer to 250 to maybe 280 in the real world. What you may or may not know is that the GV60's got a couple of rather famous siblings, the 𝙈𝙁𝙁𝙉𝙉𝙍 and the Kia EV6. All three cars are built on the same platform and share lots and lots of little bits and bobs. However, they all feel very different and they're all quite different propositions. So let's see what makes the GV60 different from the EV6 and the 𝙈𝙁𝙁𝙁𝙉, and then perhaps decide which one you'd prefer. Okay folks, so here's the boot space, 432 litres in this one, which compares to 490 in the EV6. The 𝙈𝙁𝙁𝙁𝙁 from memory is 537 litres. Of course, you've also got a bit of space in the front as well. There's also a bit of space under the boot floor there to keep your charging cables, your granny charger and your adapter so you can draw power from the car. All in all, a really good shaped boot, easy to get things in and out. The load cover is a piece of cake to use. The only thing, it could have been a little bit deeper.
You do also have some very useful storage in the front.
So the rear cabin is quite well equipped and really comfortable. Lovely seats, I have to say. You could get 3 adults in here, but the middle one would be a bit cramped. Plenty of headroom for me and plenty of legroom, despite the fact that the seat's actually not in its driving position at the moment. When you get in and out of the car, the memory seats sort of move to give you an easier exit and entry into the car. So this will go forward probably about another 4 inches. And as you can see, there's plenty of legroom as it is, in fairness, although it has to be said, much less than you get in the EV6 and the 𝙈𝙁𝙁𝙁𝙁, which are just cavernous in the back. You've got this little pocket here, which is quite useful, I guess. Vent is actually up here rather than mounted down in the centre, which it seems like a little stroke of genius, to be fair. Nice cup holder in the door, good quality finishes everywhere. It's just a lovely place to sit, in fairness. Down in the centre console here, you've got 2 USB-C connectors to keep all your devices charged up, and you can actually access a cubby here, so you've got loads of space under there to stow away any valuables. It's great. Okay, so when you get into the car, it immediately feels premium, like really premium. It's got probably more in common with the interior of the 𝙈𝙁𝙁𝙁𝙁 than it does with the EV6 in terms of its layout, although the three are fairly similar. You've got lovely little touches here, like this wireless charging pad, which goes down there. Nice little shallow storage cubby there, 2 cup holders with a nice rubbery grip at the bottom. You've got this awesome gear selector which sort of spins over when you start the car or turn the car off. What I would prefer though is if these 2 wheels kind of change places. For me, the infotainment system feels more natural there and the gear selector up there, but you know, first world problems and all that, folks. And then the other little issue in here is you have to go right down here to plug a phone in. There's this huge gap where you can fit a rucksack or something. I mean, there's tons of space underneath there. No, I've got that under there with no problems at all. But the fact that you have to go right down here to plug a phone in, and then I guess you've got to leave it in that cubby right down there, it just doesn't seem like the best thought out thing in an otherwise amazingly designed cabin. The aircon controls are absolutely lovely. You've got this high-res display coupled with physical controls to change the temperature. Then we've got dual screens up here, one for the infotainment and one for the driver information display. This car's got some really trick features like the augmented reality navigation and of course the famous Hyundai Group blind spot monitors are absolutely superb, great bit of design. All the information you could possibly want is available there. We do also have a head-up display, which is quite useful. And over here we've got the infotainment system, which we've become very accustomed to in Genesis vehicles. You're not wanting for anything really. It's a great system, every bit as good as the iDrive system in BMWs. Piece of cake to use. And of course, if you did want to use Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, they're both available to you too. Material quality is generally excellent, so everywhere you're going to touch, I mean, here we've got this lovely kind of suede effect. I think that might be an option. We've got leather up here, Really nice metal controls. Everything feels so premium. It feels great. You've even got fairly soft plastics on the door bins, which is something of a rarity these days. The steering wheel is a beaut. It's this 2-spoke affair, and the leather feels great. It's really chunky as well, and it just adds to that premium feel. I always think manufacturers sometimes scrimp a little bit on the steering wheel, and it's the only part of the car that you're touching the whole time you're driving it, hopefully. Why not go the extra mile? It feels great. The only material I don't particularly love in here is the grab handle for the door. It's sort of a hard, shiny plastic, and it feels okay, but it just doesn't feel as premium as the rest of it. I think that probably should have been wrapped in a bit of leather or something. It would have just added something to it. Of course, you can also grab this portion of the door, and that has got a bit of leather on it, so it feels a bit nicer. Generally, superb quality throughout. Tons of storage in here, as I've touched on already. You can get a big bag under there. You've got another large cubby down there. You've got this shallow cubby here. You've got a glove box, which is a shallow drawer rather than a traditional glove box. And for me, the drawer type glove boxes work far better, and it's a stroke of design genius. Overall, folks, just a great interior that really does stand above the Ioniq 5 and the EV6, which both have nice interiors themselves. Folks, something I forgot to mention while we were looking in the rear cabin was that just beneath that back seat is a 3-pin plug socket, and unlike many cars, it's actually quite beefy. You can draw 3.5 kilowatts of power back from the car, and that's even powerful enough to charge another EV with a granny cable. That's pretty impressive. So let's talk about the driving experience in the GV60. It's got its similarities with the Ioniq 5 and the EV6. And in terms of the feel, it probably sits somewhere in between the two. Generally, I think the EV6 feels a bit sportier and a bit more kind of aimed at performance when you drive it than the Ioniq 5 does. And this sits somewhere in between the two, but it just feels that bit more refined somehow. The suspension is lovely. You don't kind of feel the hard bumps or anything like that, but it's not boaty. You can feel the weight in the car, but it still delivers plenty of grip in the corners. But where this one really excels is in cabin noise. It's just so quiet in here. It's just such a lovely place to sit and cruise. And cruising along the motorway or driving around town are both a joy, really. The only potential negative with the driving experience, but it's a very subjective thing, is I find the steering a tad light for my preference, although it's generally fairly well weighted. It does feel a tiny bit numb compared to some cars that I've driven in recent times. But again, your mileage may vary because it's a very subjective thing. Now, despite this being the slowest GV6 on offer, with a 0 to 62 time of 7.8 seconds, it in no way feels slow. It delivers the power in a really nice way. It pushes you forward at a rate of knots. Now, there are spicier versions of the GV60 available, including an all-wheel drive model with about 480 horsepower from memory that will do 0 to 60 in about 4 seconds. This one is the slowest of the range, 0 to 62 in 7.8 seconds, 225 horsepower, but it's got all the power you're ever going to need. And when you put it into sport mode and put your foot down, it doesn't hang around, folks. It really doesn't hang around. But in this kind of car, it's about enjoying the ride, it's about enjoying the comfort. You're never going to have problems overtaking anyone, even when fully laden. It's got all the power you ever realistically are going to need. Now, something strange has happened with this vehicle. Every time I've had a Genesis in the past, and I've had quite a lot of them, you're constantly asked, what is it? Or you're asked, is it a Bentley? Or is it an Aston Martin? Or whatever else. No one's mentioned it to me. And I've been out and about quite a few times and parked up, and I've been outside and been looking at it on the drive, and people have walked by that would usually stop and ask, and no one has. I don't know if that means that this one's been around and there are a few of them on the road and people are getting used to it, or if they're just becoming more familiar with the Genesis brand. But the GV70 I had last week, I got stopped every 5 minutes with someone asking me what it was. So if we take its siblings out of the equation, I suppose the main rivals from other companies are going to be things like the Audi Q4 e-tron, maybe the Tesla Model Y actually, and then like the Volvo XC40 would all kind of be close rivals, I guess. Now, the Q4 e-tron and the Electrified XC40 are both available for a fair bit less than this, and I know the Audi won't match this for fit and finish. The Volvo might, in fairness. I haven't driven either car, so I can't give you an informed opinion. And the Tesla is a very different beast. Tesla's obviously got a bit more boot space, and it's got the supercharger network to use. So they're all quite different, but this more than holds its own against stiff competition. And when you think of it competing against the XC40 and the Q4 e-tron, it almost feels like it's not. It's competing against that next class of vehicles above, which are significantly more expensive. It's just a lovely thing to drive, a lovely thing to sit in. Brilliant visibility out the front as well. It's not so good out the back. You've got really good cameras though. The top-down camera and the reversing camera are great. The visibility is not the best in the back. And one other annoyance that is becoming a bit of a trend in cars these days is there's no rear wiper. I know it maybe just spoils the design aesthetic for the man with the mood board or whatever that's drawing the car, but for me a rear wiper is just a basic practical need. The Genesis are not the only ones doing this though. I mean, a lot of companies now seem to be doing away with rear wipers, and it makes me sad. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So if you're thinking to yourself, well, I'd love an EV6 or an 𝙈𝑋5 or maybe a GV60, which one should I go for? You simply must drive all three, because they all feel similar in a lot of ways, which is obviously not particularly surprising given that they're more or less the same car underneath it all. At the same time, there are a number of key differences between all three. Just the look and feel of the interior for starters, not to mention the exterior. I mean, I personally love the look of the 𝙈𝑋5, but I know a lot of people absolutely hate them. The interior in this one is gorgeous, but it might be a bit fancy for some. I personally wouldn't have the light coloured leather, I'd go for something darker, but that's just me. But I really think you'd be doing yourself a disservice in buying either of the three cars if you hadn't driven all of them first, because those subtle differences may just be the things that make you fall in love with one of them and may turn you off one of the others. So how am I going to feel about this car going back? Well, I'm going to feel very sad, because it's a lovely thing. There's a lot to love about this car and really not very much to dislike. It's got great range, good performance, plenty of space, and it feels very premium. It's a lovely thing to spend your time in, folks. Please give this video a thumbs up and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And if you are a subscriber, click that notification bell. If you'd like to see how much it would cost you to lease a Genesis GV60, please click the link to Lease Loco in the video description. Thanks.